Welcome, everybody. If everybody could come all the way down and have a seat. My ushers in the back of students, would you please come down and also take your seats. Welcome, everybody. Welcome. Welcome. We're so happy that you came today. We really appreciate everybody's attendance. We have a few last-minute people coming in, last-minute extras. So I'm going to ask everybody to do me a couple favors before we begin. It's really important today that we all participate. And in order to participate, we need to be present. So I'm going to ask everybody to take AirPods out if they're not out. Please take a few moments and remove your AirPods. Thank you so much. Additionally, would everybody put their phones away? Thank you. Thank you. My friends who just walked in the back, those are not, you must sit with your teachers. Please come and sit with your teachers. Right here in the middle is just fine, in the very middle row there. If you can't find your teacher, you can come sit right back here in the middle row. Thank you so much. Come on down. Keep coming down. There's a great big empty row. Keep coming. Thank you so much, my friends. And you can turn right there. Thank you. Thank you. Well, welcome everybody to Westhill High School's mock presidential debate. My name is Cheryl Berkeley, and my AP Government students have been conducting since the beginning of the school, campaigns for both the Harris and Trump organizations. Today, you are going to see a debate between two students who, I want to make clear, all of the students have worked very hard in order to research and present the ideas of each candidate running for presidential office this year. In no way, shape, or form does the student that is presenting these ideas necessarily believe this information. So that's important for you to realize. It's super hard to go through this process, learn, and present this information to you. The way in which I want to give you a little bit of a background as to where this election began. For those of you sitting in the audience, we began this whole entire educational experience with the students self-selecting which campaign they were going to participate in. So they self-selected either the Harris or the Trump campaign. They then chose positions, and positions included everything from polling to, we have right now registration, voter registration. We have hard copy media, which are signs all over. We've had every day since, I believe, the second week of school, there's been an announcement by either one of the campaigns. There are social media, as well as campaign managers, and obviously polling to assess, which leads us to today, which are candidates and the debate itself. So a little bit about where they've gathered their information. The information has come from actual debates and words that have been spoken by the candidates themselves, or possibly the campaign has published. Additionally, the questions have also come from former debates that we've actually witnessed publicly. So I hope you all enjoy this. It is really, truly a wonderful experience for all. And at the end, we have a little information to conclude. Without further ado, I'd like to present to you Ash and Alana. They are going to be our moderators today.
Welcome to Westhill's 2024 mock presidential debate. Without further ado, let's introduce our candidates. Please welcome Vice President Harris. and former President Trump.
I think we should go over some ground rules. So the rules are as follows. Each candidate has 2 minutes to answer their question. The opposing candidate has 1 minute to refute that response. If the candidate is fact-checked, they have 30 seconds to respond. Questions will be on the following topics: gun rights, education, immigration, foreign policy, the economy, healthcare, abortion, climate, AI usage, and social media. Let's hop right into the question. 8 in 10 U.S. murders in 2021 involved some sort of gun. Numerous mass shootings, including the Sandy Hook shooting, came as a result of assault weapons like the AR-15 and the AK-47. Vice President Harris, what are your plans to address gun violence in America? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Thank you, Lana. So keeping students safe from gun violence in their school communities is a top priority. I'm a mother of 2 kids who are in the school system, and I simply don't want to have the fear that anything bad happens to them, and I agree that no one should have this fear. And there have been 394 school shootings that exposed more than 360,000 students to gun violence since the mass shooting at Columbia High School in Colorado in 1999. I'm committed to preventing gun violence. Under the Biden-Harris administration, we have worked to enact the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act, also known as the BSCA, which was the most significant gun safety law in nearly 30 years. Following this, President Biden created the White House Office of Gun Violence Prevention, which I've directly overseen. We've invested more resources in school safety and taken significant steps to keep firearms out of school. I focused on the following: stopping people in crisis and juveniles from accessing firearms, implementing evidence-based school-based preventative solutions, and addressing the mental health needs of students, particularly those impacted by gun violence. I'm pleased to announce the launch of the first ever National Extreme Risk Protection Order Resource Center, which will support the effective implementation of state red flag laws, which are laws that allow a family member or law enforcement to seek a court order to temporarily take away access to guns if they feel a gun owner may harm themselves or others. This resource center will assist states, local governments, law enforcement, prosecutors, attorneys, judges, clinicians, victim service providers, and behavioral health and other social service providers in optimizing the usage of these laws. We've prioritized raising awareness about how gun storage can keep schools and young people safe. Also, we've implemented the BSCA to enhance background checks for individuals under 21 who seek to purchase a firearm at a licensed gun dealer. Since its implementation, the Department of Justice has conducted enhanced background checks on more than 230,000 transactions. This means that this has kept 230,000 firearms out of the hands of dangerous and prohibited persons, and over a quarter of those denials were based solely on information received through the additional BSCA-enabled outreach. I plan to invest millions of dollars to go towards the Stop School Violence program and towards the mental health of our youth to avoid anyone falling down the wrong path. I will call on Congress to pass universal background checks, a national red flag law, an assault weapons ban, and a secure storage law. To repeal the Protection of Lawful Commerce in Arms Act, PLCAA, which gives gun dealers and manufacturers special immunity from certain liability for their products, and to increase appropriations to support youth mental health and violence prevention strategies.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to focus on everything my opponent just said and realize that everything that she just said further affects legal gun owners from getting the weapons that they need and have for their rights. It is the right of the American citizen to own a firearm, and that has been in our Constitution for hundreds of years. It is imperative that we realize that everything my opponent just said will further make it more difficult for legal, law-abiding citizens to purchase firearms and use them for protection. Now, everything she said and she wants to do is amazing. That's great that we want to do that, and it's great. And the Trump campaign also advises and advocates for background checks. But we have to realize that the problem is deeper than this. It's rooted in more issues. The statistic presented for this question discusses 8 out of 10 people in gun violence. But what are the firearms? Are they legal firearms? Are they illegal firearms? If somebody wants to commit a crime, ladies and gentlemen, with a firearm, they are going to obtain that firearm and they are going to commit that crime because that is the mind state they are in. It does not matter if it is legal, if it is illegal or whatever they want to do. But whatever means necessary to commit that crime, they will use it. So we have to focus. Do we make it harder for our citizens, law-abiding citizens who pay their taxes, follow the law, follow their rules to obtain firearms? Or do we make it harder and push for more law enforcement involvement and more enforcement from the states on illegal firearms and figure out where all the illegal firearms are coming from? Thank you.
Thank you, former President Trump. Now I'll ask you the same question. 8 in 10 U.S. murders in 2021 involved some sort of gun. Numerous mass shootings, including the Sandy Hook shooting, came as a result of the assault weapons like the AR-15 and AK-47. Former President Trump, what are your plans to address gun violence in America?
Again, I say, ladies and gentlemen, exactly what I have presented. How do we create a law that covers and focuses on every single circumstance that somebody could commit a crime with? Let's take Sandy Hook for an example. Adam Lanza, the school shooter that went to Sandy Hook Elementary School, used firearms that his mother purchased for him, turned on her, killed her with that firearm, and then went to the school to commit the crime. Let's look at that. How do we create a law that prevents that? As my opponent discussed, maybe more mental health, more checks, more institutions that focus on checking these things. But what extent can they really get in the home and see what's going on? To what extent can they really control that? Again, if somebody really wants to commit a crime with a firearm, like Adam Lanza did, if somebody wants to commit an act of mass violence, they will do it. Fire with a firearm, a bomb, a knife, a sword, anything you can think of. Somebody in that mindset is not thinking possibly and is not thinking straight, and they will do anything they can to harm others. Therefore, we must focus on stopping the bleeding first, which is using armed police officers in our schools. My opponent wants to use all this money, all this funding, and donating money from our government and from her own funds to focus on improving this issue and making it and resolving it. Why not focus that money on putting armed school resource officers in the school who will have close bonds with students, who will be able to monitor the schools and be able to be a deterrent to anybody that wants to commit harm? That is our plan. That is what we advocate for. And we must realize that we have to stop the bleeding first. We have to combat the issue dead on, cut the head off the snake, and realize that we have to focus directly on the issue before we focus on everything before, so we can protect our citizens and we can protect our schools. Thank you.
Thank you, President Trump. Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute for review.
Thank you. Well, let's talk about what Trump has just said. He basically was saying that it's a problem that we're imposing things that would restrict a person's access to get a gun, that it would be a harder process to get a gun. And is that, I ask you all, is that worth it? That you might have to go through an extra couple of steps to get a gun? Is it worth to put our students in danger just because we have to ask a couple more questions for a background check? Is it worth it that we don't do that and that we just hope that everyone's going to be a good person and that nothing bad will ever happen again? Trump has no plan. It's bold of him to say that my plans won't be effective, that I won't get anything done, when he has no plan himself. His only plan is to have police officers at school, which he thinks will solve everything. And I understand how that's not effective. That's why I advocate for stricter gun control measures. That's why I want to address the root causes of gun violence, even though he claims that I won't be able to do that. I want to look into poverty, inequality, and access to mental health services. Access to mental health services should be for everybody. He has no plan for this. He has nothing to say about it. I believe in a comprehensive approach, and I want to include prevention strategies, and I understand that there is a clear need for immediate action in response to mass shootings. And that's why I advocate for legislation that limits access to military-style weapons. When all you will hear from Trump is that my plans will just be ineffective, while clearly Trump is just focused on the fact that it might be a little bit harder to get a gun, even though we are trying to keep the community safe. If keeping our students safe is not a priority for him, then why do we want him as our leader?
Now that leads us into our next question. America is ranked 13th in terms of our education system, despite having the largest economy in the world. Personally, I have had to move to school districts due to low funding of our education system, and many in Stanford are worried about the increased budget cuts. Vice President Harris, if elected, what are your plans to reform our education system? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, so I would advocate for universal pre-kindergarten, which can be funded through a combination of federal and state resources. The plan typically involves increasing federal investment, reallocating existing education funds, and potentially raising taxes on high-income earners and corporations.
Is that going to be with the same money you promised?
Excuse me, I was talking.
Please let Vice President Harris speak.
By providing grants to states that implement universal pre-K programs, the goal is to ensure that all children have access to quality early education, which is seen as a crucial investment in the future workforce and economy. I also promote expanded career and technical education and want to put a reduced emphasis on standardized testing and efforts to improve teachers' working conditions. Providing free universal preschool for 4-year-olds will save the families of 5 million children $13,000 a year. We also want to reduce chronic absenteeism by building social and emotional supports at schools, offering literacy programs, setting high expectations for student attendance, providing intensive tutoring, extending the school day and school year, and expanding community schools. We also want to help lift student achievement rather than pushing them based on state standardized tests. We support efforts to provide more timely, well-rounded, actionable feedback on student learning and progress to educators and to families that will continue to support instruction and student success while upholding rigorous academic standards. We oppose the use of private school vouchers, tuition tax credits, opportunity scholarships, and other schemes that divert taxpayer-funded resources away from public education. Public tax dollars should simply never be used to discriminate. And we'll continue to work to increase accountability at charters, holding them to the same transparency standards as public schools.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
Again, my opponent discusses making one big change for the national government and making one big change nationally for all schools. Every school in the United States of America is different. Every need, every piece of funding, everything that they need is different. So how is it possible that she can do all of that and my opponent can focus on every single school in America and give them the resources that they need from the national government? The answer is this is not possible. While it is good what she wants to do, we have to realize that if we put the responsibility of education back to the states, if we push it to the states will be able to have a closer control over what they want to do and what they need to focus on. If a certain state has a standardized test and they see that their students are falling low in a certain area, they can do what they need to do and allocate the funds accordingly to fix that issue. And they can see what they need to do to allocate funds to their school. If we bring the states back into education and we have the states focus completely on their state, the schools in their state, and their education, and delegate it down to a more local level, we will see better results which are more effective, rather than the national government, which will take forever to provide the right funding, to provide the right things that we need to do. And for the universal pre-K, it's a great idea. It's great that we want to educate our young Americans. This is what I stand for. But we have to realize that we do not have the money. My opponent is also promising tax cuts, monies to new families that have children. How is my opponent going to afford all of this when we are already in trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of debt? How is she going to afford this? How is she going to give all the schools what they need to do? This is where we need to delegate it down to the states, because only the states truly understand their own circumstances with education.
Thank you for your time. Former President Trump will ask you the same question. America is ranked 13th in terms of our education system, despite having the largest economy in the world. Personally, I've had to move school districts because of the low funding, because of our education system. And many in Stanford are worried about the increased budget cuts. Former President Trump, if elected, what are your plans to reform our education system? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Again, the United States spends more money per pupil on education than any other country in the world, and yet we're at the bottom of every educational list in terms of results. Specifically, we're going to close the Department of Education in Washington, D.C. and send it back to the states, where it belongs, and let the states run our educational system as it should be run. Our great teachers, who are so important to the future and well-being of our country, will be cherished and protected by the Republican Party so that they can do the job of educating our students that they so dearly want to do. We can hope to never have a situation where the teachers were unhappy with how they were being treated. And we must realize that as a government, the best thing we can do is give the responsibility to take care of our teachers and to take care of our students back to the states. Because the voters understand what's happening, the states understand what's happening, the people inside of those states understand what's happening. And how can somebody from, per se, Nebraska tell somebody from Wyoming public schools what to do? How can another state, and how can we as a national government focus together to understand our systems when we should just push it back to the states? The states understand what's going on. They have state testing, standardized testing within the states. They have tests, and they also have the teachers that reside in those states. If the states can focus on their education and only on their own education without having to meet a national standard that will distract them from focusing on their individual school systems, it will be better than a national system. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. Vice President Kamala Harris, you have 1 minute for review.
Yeah, so I would just like to say it's not surprising at all that we've seen a lot of contradictions, and just his response to my answer and his answer to the question as well. Let's go back to what I said about states. I said that by providing grants to states that implement universal pre-kindergarten programs, the goal is to ensure
Where's the money coming
that
from?
all
Where's the money
children
coming
have
from?
access to quality early
Where's the
education.
money coming
Let
from?
Vice President Harris speak, please.
I already talked about where the money was coming from. I
Where?
said it was funded through a combination of federal and state resources. Also, so in my response talking about universal pre-kindergarten programs, I specifically said that we want to ensure that all children have access to quality education. Not certain.
So do I, but
not
we're gonna
stop
afford that.
Please let
interrupting me,
Vice
please.
President-
Please stop
Vice
interrupting.
President Harris continue.
You're interrupting. I'm talking about all children here, not children in one state over another, not, all children across the world. We want them to, in our country especially, we want them to have good education, not just in certain states over other states. And he was talking about that, saying, every school is different, and how can we leave it to the states, and that's going to affect things terribly. But he also is saying that he wants to let states decide what happens with their education, because states understand what's happening, and it's up to them to make decisions
They do.
about things. But apparently when I'm talking about states, it's a problem. And let's just talk again about the money, where the money would come from. We'll hear a lot of talking about money today because Trump likes to say that I have no money for all the things I want to do, but he doesn't talk about where his money's coming from. But when I talked about the money, I said that we would reallocate existing education funds. So we have the money, we're reallocating it, we're prioritizing certain things. That is something that you will see he cannot do today. He'll be
Why not give it to the
prioritizing
states
the
and
wrong
let them
things,
handle it?
not being able to make a decision. He'll be
I
going back
actually
and
think
forth.
we have some very important topics to move on to. So let's hop into our next question. Vice President Harris, do you think armed police officers should be assigned to protect public schools?
Well, we should do whatever it takes to keep our children safe. I think I've made that clear. Armed officers in school could provide a sense of security for our teachers and students, but instead of merely treating the symptoms of tragic school shootings and what has happened around the country, we need to look into regulation of firearms to ensure that they don't come into the hands of people with bad intentions. And this could include more rigorous background checks, but also involving parents and schools to help our children and our students feel included. Thank you.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
Again, it is imperative that we have armed police officers in our schools to first stop the bleeding, as I stated before. We must understand that the issue goes way, way deeper than the surface level. And having armed police officers in every school and pushing our funds towards that will be a direct deterrent to any individual that wants to commit an act of violence in a school, and the law enforcement officers will be able to respond. Now, my opponent discusses, where is my money coming from? Where are my funds coming from? And again, I bring it back to you. You talk about all the things you're going to do. You talk about all the money you're going to spend and reallocate the funds, and there's already funds. That's great. Why not put the funds towards armed police officers in schools to nip the issue in the bud before you focus on anything else? There's absolutely no reason why that money can't be used for armed police officers in our schools so that they can directly deter any individuals that want to commit harm. And I'm not displacing the issue, and I'm not putting the issue behind, because I care about our students and I care about the people in our country. So it is a wild accusation to even claim that I do not care about the issue at hand. Therefore, we need armed police officers to be a direct deterrent, and then we'll focus on the issue from there. And if you're disagreeing with that and you say that I should focus on other things, then maybe you're the one that doesn't really care about our students and families. Thank you.
Thank you, former President Trump. Former President Trump, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you think armed police officers should be assigned to protect public schools?
Yes, armed police officers, again, should 100% be assigned to public schools. While the issue runs very deep in society, we must realize that first addressing the issue, we need to come up with a direct solution which will combat active threats to American schools and their safety. Armed police officers can build bonds with students while also protecting the safety and security of the school. Armed police officers are a direct deterrent to school shooters or an individual seeking to commit an act of mass violence, because they have to first get through those law enforcement officers protecting the school to commit their crime. And they will likely not have an easier target as they most plan for and most intend to attack. The trained officers will also be able to serve as a positive role model to the school and its community, and be able to provide more manpower for a school in case an issue arises, such as a fight, dispute, dangerous leak, spill, or any other emergency within the building. Society and times are changing, and before we can focus on the root mental health issue behind violence in our schools, we must fund and build a directive such as armed police officers in our schools.
Thank you. Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute to respond.
So let's talk about this. safety is crucial, but relying on armed police officers is not the comprehensive solution that
We're
we
going to
need.
stop the threats, Ms. Harris.
Instead of increasing police presence, we should focus on creating supportive environments through mental health resources, conflict resolution programs, and community engagement.
Why can't we do that after we protect the
Furthermore, we must
students?
be mindful of the potential negative impact that police presence can have on students, particularly those of color, who are disproportionately affected by the school-to-prison pipeline. Our goal should be to ensure that schools are safe havens for all students, where they can learn and grow without fear. We need to invest into holistic approaches that address the root causes of violence rather than treating the symptoms.
We'll do that
And I'd
after we
also like
protect
to
our
talk
students,
about
Ms.
Trump's
Harris. Please
saying
don't interrupt.
our police officers are not going to fix everything. And let's open the scope of this problem of gun violence. Trump doesn't care about gun violence in
Not
society.
true.
He's only talking about
President
schools right now.
Trump.
If we have more checks on people, background checks on if they should be able to have guns or not, if we have red flag laws, then we can prevent gun violence not only just in schools, but in society in
So put
general.
armed police
But
officers
see,
in. We're
Trump is
President
only
Trump.
focused
Do
on
not
these
interrupt.
police officers. He doesn't care about background checks. He
Not
wants
true.
people to have easy access to guns. No restrictions, no background checks, no red flag laws, nothing. He doesn't care whose hands they get into. And now he's just saying that we should have police officers to fix everything.
administration
But
put
that's not
background
gonna
checks.
fix everything.
President Trump, please
Getting
don't
to the
interrupt.
Getting to the root issue of this would be ensuring that people aren't getting the guns in the first place, not just that the armed police officers might scare people away. Thank you.
Thank you.
For our next question, Vice President Harris, the immigration issue in the U.S.-Mexico border has been a big topic for many people in Stanford. In 2023, immigration rates skyrocketed. Vice President Harris, what do you plan to do about America's border crisis?
Well, in running for vice president in 2020, I promised to close private immigration detention centers, limit deportations, and fight for a path to citizenship for undocumented immigrants. I now want to sign into law the tough border compromise that Congress was unable to pass in 2024 after Trump objected to it.
Not true.
This would have closed loopholes in the asylum process and given the president greater authority to shut down the border when crossings were high and limited parole of migrants, which allows them to temporarily enter the United States. And my campaign team has said that unauthorized boarding crossings are illegal. But last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. And we wanted to create an earned pathway to citizenship and to secure our border. Let's not forget what they've done to tear our families apart. And now they've pledged to carry out the largest deportation, the mass deportation in American history. And let's not forget that 5,000 migrant children were
More criminals
forcibly
in our country,
separated
Ms.
from
Harris.
their
Can you
parents
please refrain from the interruptions, please?
when their parents were arrested at the border and prosecuted for crossing into the U.S. illegally. Our biggest priority should be securing the border, not trying to pull innocent families apart. With all the drugs and weapons currently flowing into our country, I believe resources could be best spent on combating these dangers to our society rather than attempting to dismantle the lives people have already built here in America. Thank you.
Before President Trump has a minute to review, I would like to do a quick fact check, going back to what you said. Quote, last year, Joe and I brought together Democrats and conservative Republicans to write the strongest border bill in decades. Just a quick fact check. While it is true that the border bill had been written with conservative Republicans, it's not accurate to say that this was the strongest border bill in decades, unless you count 11 years as decades. The 2013 comprehensive immigration overhaul that got 68 votes in the Senate and was killed by the GOP House did far more than this bill did. Now, former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
My opponent discusses how I'm going to rip families apart and how I'm going to destroy the American dream that they have come here to create. But we must realize that the Donald Trump campaign is not focusing on individuals that are law-abiding citizens and that are paying our taxes. We're focusing on dangerous criminals who have crossed our border about drugs, firearms, and trafficking of our citizens. And for 4 years, my opponent and her president have been in office and they have done absolutely nothing to stop and fix this issue. They claim they have, but it keeps getting worse and worse and worse, which is why you have to vote for Donald Trump if you want direct action on this issue. It is great to take a slow, steady approach where we can appease everybody and ensure we don't break families apart. But the reality is my opponent and her Democratic Party have waited way too long, and American citizens are being hurt daily by the effects of immigration and illegal immigration. So we must realize that what we have to do is a direct action in order to, again, cut the head off the snake to ensure that we can protect our citizens first. And if that means going around and just investigating and finding criminals that are illegal immigrants and have committed a crime in the United States and deporting them and giving them no opportunity to come back and commit harm to our citizens, that is what we must do. We have to put our citizens first. The Donald Trump campaign does not want to rip or apart innocent families. We advocate for the American dream more. And to prove that we advocate for the American dream more, that is why we are going to find these criminals and remove them from stopping anybody from preventing innocent families to experience the American dream. Thank you.
Thank you, President Trump. Former President Trump. The immigration issue of the U.S.-Mexico border is a big topic for many people in Stanford. In 2023, immigration rates skyrocketed. Former President Trump, what do you plan to do about the America's border crisis?
Again, we must focus on the dangerous criminals that are in our country, and we must remove them from our society so that we can ensure our citizens and the citizens that have immigrated legally and gone through the process are safe and are able to be protected. It is not fair to the law-abiding citizens, and it is not fair to the immigrants who came to our country legally to experience the after effects of illegal immigration. It is not right for their resources to be taken away, and it is not right for the citizens of our nation to suffer the consequences from illegal immigration and criminals coming over the border. Now, my opponent, again, claims to have got people together, which she was fact-checked on. She did not get anybody together, and she did not create a plan that was effective. And earlier we discussed how I shot down a bill that was created in order for better immigration laws and better protection for immigration. I shot that bill down because it was not effective. It is not effective enough. We need more solutions that are direct, and again, we need to take the issue on head on. It is unfair to our citizens and our people in America to make them wait any longer for direct action. You want direct action, you want a safe border, vote for Donald Trump. Thank you.
Thank you, Former President. Vice President Kamala Harris, you have 1 minute for you.
Yeah, so again, another contradiction from Trump. First, he said that he did not shut down the compromise. He said that he didn't do anything when he interrupted me, and that he didn't object to it, but then he just said he did. So which one is it? Now,
The
let's just
objection
make this
because the bill
clear.
was
Let's
wrong.
just make this clear. Trump doesn't care about who he's deporting. He doesn't care if he's deporting criminals or if he's just deporting innocent lives. He does not care
Where's the
about
evidence?
fighting. He
Former
does not
President
care
Trump,
about fighting
you
for a
have
path for citizenship for undocumented immigrants. He doesn't care at all. In fact, he's so worried about safety because he has called immigrants animals. Animals. He has dehumanized them and called them animals.
And your
So let's
predecessors
talk
put them in
about
cages,
that.
Mrs.
Former
Harris.
President Trump,
Predecessors
President
put them in
Trump,
cages.
Former President Trump.
Trump, he's not worried just because there could be some criminals. He's worried because he thinks they're animals. All of them. He thinks every single one of them is an animal. And I would just like to make that very clear because it's not just about deporting and keeping America safe. No, it's about deliberately keeping them out and preventing other people from entering the country, even if instead of fighting for a path for citizenship. He just wants them gone. He wants them over.
Where's your
He
evidence?
doesn't care
Former
who.
President Trump.
He doesn't care who. He just wants them gone because in his world, in his mind, they're animals, and that's not what we need in a
That's
leader
why your
of our
predecessors
country.
put
them in
And that's
cages.
not going to help our country, and that is why I urge you to consider what he's saying right now.
Thank you.
Vice President Harris, what, if any, steps would you take to counter Russian aggression against Ukraine? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, so I actually met with President Zelensky a few days before Russia invaded, and I tried to force to change territorial boundaries to defy one of the most important international rules and norms, which is the importance of sovereignty and territorial integrity. I shared with him American intelligence about how he could defend himself. And days later, I went to NATO's eastern flank to Poland and Romania. We brought 50 countries together to support Ukraine in its righteous defense. And because of our support, because of the air defense, the ammunition, the artillery, the javelin, the Abrams tanks that we have provided, Ukraine stands as an independent and free country. If Donald Trump were president again, Putin would be sitting in Kiev right now and understand what that would mean. Because Putin's agenda is not just about Ukraine. Understand why the European allies and our NATO allies are so thankful that you are no longer president, and that we understand the importance of greatest military alliance the world has ever known, which is NATO. And what we have preserved is the ability of Zelensky and the Ukrainians to fight for their independence. Otherwise, Putin would be sitting in Kiev right now with his eyes on the rest of Europe, starting with Poland. Thank you.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
Ms. Harris, you discussed a lot about how Putin would be sitting in Kiev, and that he's thankful that NATO is thankful that I'm not the president of the United States because they were able to respond to the issue without my deterrence. But I wanted to tell you personally that Putin is thankful that you're president so he can invade another country and take it over without you stopping him, because that's not what you've done. You claim to have put together, you claim to put a coalition together to stop the violence and stop the issues from happening in Ukraine, to stop the war. Where is that? It's still raging on. Ukrainian and Russian men and women alike are dying every single day, and you've absolutely done nothing to stop the issue or slow it down whatsoever. Your weapons and your firearms are great. We should fund and we should be able to support Ukraine. But we also have to realize the American citizens are taking critical money and critical funds that are being taken away from them in a time where inflation is at an all-time high, again, due to your policies and immigration. And what I'd like to say is that you do not realize how important it is that we need a strong negotiator. We need a strong negotiator, and we need somebody who's strong to be able to bring both sides of the case and bring them together in order to understand the conflict, in order to talk to the Russians and talk to the Ukrainians to come up with a solution. Therefore, you vote for Donald Trump because I'm a strong negotiator. All my opponent has done is let this war rage on, and innocent men and women and children have been killed every single day since they have been in office, and they have done absolutely nothing to stop it. Thank you.
Thank you. President Trump, your administration has taken a forceful approach towards Iran, demanding with little international support something very close to regime change. Is that how you would characterize it, and is that a realistic aim that you would continue to pursue if you wanted a second term as president?
Ladies and gentlemen, we must understand that our enemies and those that want to hurt our country have no intention of playing by the rules. They have no intention of stopping, and they have no intention of playing by the rules and doing anything they can to make it a fair fight and to make it a fair argument. Every edge we must have against our enemies must be kept. We must be above, and we must be above the line to determine how we can fight against our enemies and how we can be an effective deterrent to them. I do not want war, and I do not advocate for war. But if Iran and other nations want to keep enticing the United States, and if they want to keep putting pressure on, we will respond aggressively. Whether that be with ground troops, whether that be through diplomacy, which is more preferable. Again, my campaign and myself, we are strong negotiators, and we know how to take both sides of the case and apply it and use it for our advantage as the United States. Again, we must realize that our enemies do not care about us. Everybody in this room, our enemies do not care. They will watch you crash and burn under their boot, and they have no care for you, which is why you need a strong president like myself in order to be able to understand that and focus on how you feel, and focus on our citizens, focus on your safety, focus on what to do in that situation. Therefore, we need to keep up with the aggressive tactics, aggressive diplomacy, and negotiate on our terms, not our enemies. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, it's well known that Trump said that Putin can do whatever the hell he wants and go into Ukraine. It is a well-known fact that Trump said when Russia went into Ukraine that it was brilliant. It is well known that he exchanged love letters with Kim Jong-un. And it is absolutely well known that these dictators are rooting for you to be president again because they're so...
Is that why they invaded when you were
Do not interrupt.
They can manipulate you with flattery and favors.
They didn't invade
And
when I
that
was in
is
charge.
why
Do not
so-
interrupt.
That is why so many military leaders who you have worked with have told me you are a disgrace. And that is why we understand, and we have a president who is not consistently weak and wrong on national security, including the importance of upholding and respecting the
that why
highest
people are still
regard in
dying,
our
Ms. Harris?
military.
Former President
And that's
Trump.
another one. When I went to meet with President Zelensky, I now met with him 5 times, over 5 times. The reality is, it's been about standing as America, as America always should, as a leader upholding international rules and norms, as a leader who shows strength, understanding the alliances we have around the world are dependent on our ability to look out for our friends and not favor our enemies because you adore strong men instead of caring about democracy. And that is very much what's at stake here.
Is that why they invaded when you were president?
The American people have a right to rely on a president who understands the significance of America's role and responsibility in terms of ensuring that there is stability and ensuring that we can stand up to our principles and not sell them for benefit of personal flattery. And that is what you stand for. Thank you.
When it comes to foreign policy, a very important country that we interact with often is China. So, Vice President Harris, is China destined to be America's next enemy? How can we avoid war with another nuclear-armed superpower such as China?
Well, China is not meant to be our next enemy, but there is a certain amount of care and consideration that must be used when dealing with such a superpower. Let's remember that Trump has sold the U.S. out to China by selling American chips to them to help improve and modernize their military. The best thing we can do as a country is to keep American technology out of China. China has a very strong military on their own and wishes to surpass the U.S. as the leading global power. Why are we giving them the resources to do so? To avoid any friction or even talk of war, we need to maintain open lines of communication to responsibly manage the competition between our countries. A lot of that tension is rooted in the competition. And that does not mean we are seeking conflict by creating distance between our countries. We are simply de-risking. And it's not about pulling out, but it's about ensuring that we are protecting American interests and that we are a leader in terms of rules of the road as opposed to following others' rules. Thank you.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
My opponent again talks about communication. Communication, 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 and I agree. And because I agree, that says so much about her. She talks about communication and having open lines of communication. How are you going to talk about communicating with China when you can't even communicate with Russia and Ukraine to come to an issue and to come to a solution? There's people still dying out there, and you haven't even addressed any of those accusations about it. You claim to have done so much for the diplomacy and for peace over there, yet people are still dying. So how can you protect the American people, and how can you protect them against China? And my rebuttal to her is, how are you going to do all this when you can't even effectively communicate in Eastern Europe? How are you going to do all this with China? Where is your strong negotiation skills? They didn't invade Eastern Europe when I was president, but they invaded when your administration was in power. So how are you going to protect your communication if you can't even protect Eastern Europe? How are you going to protect the Pacific? Thank you.
Thank you. Former President Trump. Is China destined to be America's next enemy? How can we avoid war with another nuclear-armed superpower such as China? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's not a matter of destinations or ifs, it's a matter of action. As a national government, we must focus on preserving and defending ourselves against foreign aggression. We have come to terms with the fact that the Chinese are likely watching us and are working towards gaining every edge in the competition. It is no secret that we must continue to develop and flourish as a nation in every way possible so we can maintain an advantage that will deter our enemy from provoking conflict. There is a way to avoid a nuclear ground conflict with China, which is to stay away from and not conduct a full-scale invasion of Taiwan. We negotiate on our terms, not theirs. America first. It is imperative that my campaign has control over the nation in case of such events or aggressions take place, so that the proper negotiation and diplomatic steps can be taken to ensure a larger conflict does not boil over. We know this for a fact in part due to Chinese spy balloons that were shot down and analyzed by our intelligence services, where they discovered they had the capabilities to gather and report intelligence, confirming we are being watched. With that said, through my campaign and through my negotiation skills, we will negotiate on American terms. We will not negotiate on any other country's terms, and we will not bow down to any other nation. You need a strong leader and a strong president who will make sure to put your needs and American citizens' needs first. That is not the Harris campaign, that is the Trump campaign. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Kamala. Harris. You have 1 minute to respond.
We heard from Trump that under Biden-Harris administration, we've had all these problems happen. There's no communication. Power needs to be redistributed. Whatever.
Sure.
But let's talk about his communication. Let's talk about what has happened when he was president, and let's just highlight the fact that there's a reason he's not the president right now. He failed us. We gave him the opportunity to be our president. He was our president, and he failed us as a country, and that is why he's not our president right now.
On the popular vote?
That is why he's not our
Respect
president, because he failed us, and because there is trust lost with him, because we don't know what he cares about anymore. We know that he doesn't care about us. We know that he's not a good leader, and we know that under his rule, America's just going to suffer.
Still on the popular vote.
Please stop interrupting former President Trump.
Let's talk about addressing human rights. It's vital to hold China accountable for its human right abuses. We must support those fighting for their freedoms and promote democracy without escalating tensions unnecessarily. Let's talk about strategic competition. We should recognize that competition with China can coexist with cooperation in areas of mutual interest. It's not about labeling China as an enemy, but rather as a strategic competitor that we must navigate through thoughtfully. And let's talk about investing in innovation. To compete efficiently, we need to invest in our own technology and innovation. Strengthening our economy, workforce, and education system will ensure that we remain competitive without resorting to aggression. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Harris, do you think America's NATO allies should honor their commitment to pay 2% of their GDP on defense?
Yes, increased defense spending strengthens NATO's collective defense capabilities and enhances its ability to deter potential adversaries. This is particularly relevant in light of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which has heightened security concerns in Europe. NATO is by far the world's most successful security alliance, benefiting both the US and our European allies. I believe that America's NATO allies should honor their commitment to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. This commitment is not just a number. It reflects our shared values and our collective security. NATO is built on the principle of mutual defense. It's crucial that all member countries contribute fairly to ensure the strength and readiness of the alliance. When allies meet their defense spending commitments, it not only strengthens NATO, but also enhances global security, as I mentioned. And we live in a complex and increasingly dangerous world, and we must work together to address common threats. However, it's important to recognize that defense spending should be strategic and aligned with each nation's unique security needs. While I support allies meeting their commitments, I also believe in the importance of diplomacy and collaboration in addressing security challenges. We must continue to engage in dialogue to strengthen our alliances and to ensure that NATO remains a vital force for peace and stability. Thank you.
Thank you. Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
Again, my opponent talks about communication. And again, I will bring it back to Russia and Ukraine. Claims to be a strong negotiator, claims to be able to appease all sides of the case and have dialogue, claims to be able to do all these things. There's no evidence that she's been able to do it so far, and she has not told you how she will do it. She's all using words and words and words to hype it up, but will she really take action when everything gets rolling? Everything she promised, she's promising so much to the American people, with tax cuts, with education, with immigration, with foreign policy, with gun laws. All of this at once is going to be very overwhelming. And clearly, since she doesn't want to delegate education down to the states and have the states have a better understanding of their education, she's taking more of a burden on the national government. So how is she going to focus on extremely delicate negotiations and extremely delicate dialogue with other nations? It is simply not possible. My opponent is overloading herself with things to do and overloading our national government, which will lead to dangerous effects for our citizens. And you will not be able to get the care and the things that she's promised with all of this on her plate. How is she going to be a strong negotiator while maintaining everything she wants to do for our education, for immigration, and for gun laws? Thank you.
Former President Trump, I'm going to ask you the same question. Do you think America's NATO allies should honor their commitment to pay 2% of their GDP on defense?
I turn the question back to the audience. Do you enjoy living in a free world? If the answer is yes, we must maintain an aggressive and fierce defense force across all of NATO to ensure that we can save lives and resources by not engaging or fighting in a war that can be avoided if our enemies are too afraid to even touch us with the sheer amount of firepower that we possess. It is important that our equipment can be deployed rapidly, effectively, and in a safe and effective manner so that our allies can deter enemy forces so the United States can respond. If our NATO allies maintain this 2% of their GDP and spend the right money, it will deter enemy powers from attacking them. And if they are attacked, all of the equipment, all of the resources, all of the effective things that they have that are modernized, up to standard, and that are deadly will stop our enemies from pushing in and taking more territory and hurting innocent lives so that the United States can sweep in and respond and crush any deterrents and any enemies from invading our free worlds. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute to refute.
Trump likes to talk about a lot of what I'm promising, how it's not going to work, how, I'm not going to benefit anyone. But let's just talk about what he has promised. To deport all immigrants? To get rid of these so-called animals?
Criminals
Let's not confuse having a plan and solution for major problems and how we can fix them versus being overwhelmed with things. I'm not overwhelmed with things. I have a plan for solutions. Trump is just saying that because he knows that he doesn't have a plan. He knows that whatever he's going to do is not going to be good enough. It's not going to benefit our country. And that's why he's just trying to attack me, saying that, all my plans, I have too many plans, I have too many things going on. No, just because I have things going on, just because I have a plan for our country and the betterment of our country, doesn't mean I'm overwhelmed. You're underwhelmed because you have nothing for the future. Thank you.
On to our next question. Vice President Harris, is the economy better off than it was 4 years ago?
Yeah, so I was raised as a middle-class kid, and I want to lift the middle class. I imagine and I have a plan to build an opportunity economy. I recognize that there's a shortage of homes and housing cost is way too expensive. for far too many people. Young families need the support to raise their children. And that is why I intend on extending a tax cut for those families on $6,000 so they can afford to buy necessities. I have a passion for small businesses, and my plan is to give a $50,000 tax deduction to
On top
start
of
up
the
small
$13,000
businesses,
for
Please stop interrupting.
knowing that they are part of the backbone of our economy. Now, Trump wants to provide a tax cut for billionaires and big corporations,
Where
which will
does it-
result in $5 trillion.
I appreciate refraining from interrupting.
It will result in $5 trillion to America's deficit. I call his plan the Trump sales tax, a 20% tax on everyday goods you rely on to get through the month. Economists have said that this would result in more than $4,000 a year for middle-class families. Thank you.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
Is that why all inflation has been at an all-time high in recent years under your administration? I don't understand how you want to implement all these economic policies and how you want to implement everything to help the American people when you understand that we can't even afford it. And it is untrue to say that I want to help the rich and I want to provide more for the rich. What benefit does that bring to the American citizens? Clearly, you have shown that all you've researched into is specific things on my campaign and specific niches that aren't even true. You're focusing on things that don't exist. You're fighting with a ghost here. So I completely don't understand what you're saying. We're at 21% for inflation, and that's generous because many things are 50, 60, 70, and 80% higher than they were just a few years ago. This has been a disaster for people and for the middle class and for every class. So I don't understand what you're saying with your economic policies, and I don't understand how you can afford and provide for everything that you claim to do while also focusing on foreign
Didn't
policy.
you leave us the worst unemployment since the Great
Please don't
Depression?
interrupt.
Haven't you left the inflation rates as high as possible? The inflation's high. What are you going to do about that? People are suffering in America due to your administration and inflation rates. How are you going to solve this if you can't even solve it when you're in power right now? Thank you.
Before we continue on, there's a small fact check. The statement that inflation is at 21% is incorrect. The inflation rate over the last 5 years has increased to a cap of only 8%.
Still higher than it's ever been.
And in 2023, it was 4.12%, a 3.89% drop compared to 2022. Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute to respond.
Yeah, so let's not remember that Donald Trump left us the worst unemployment since the Great Depression. He left us the worst public health epidemic in a century. And he left us the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War. And what we have done is clean up Donald Trump's mess. What we have done, and what I intend to do, is hold on to the aspirations and hopes of the American people. And you've heard lies. You're gonna hear more. And you'll hear name calling and grievances. And you'll hear a dangerous plan called 2025 that Trump plans on implementing. And I believe that the American people want a president who understands the importance of bringing people together. And I pledge to be that president for all Americans.
Thank you, Vice President Harris. Both of you have proposed tax cuts that would cost trillions of dollars in federal revenue. With the nation's debt already at a level that many economists consider unsustainable, how do you justify calling for even more tax cuts? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, it's true that that national debt is at historically high levels. But in the aftermath of COVID and economic downturn, we need to stimulate economic growth, incentivize investments, and have small businesses and create jobs. This increased economic activity will lead to higher tax revenues in the long run. The tax cuts I propose are aimed at providing direct benefits to families, like expanded credits for childcare and education. We want to invest in the middle class to help stimulate the economy. And these cuts can help families invest in their futures, which ultimately drives economic growth. We must also focus on sustainable economic growth through investments in infrastructure, clean energy, and education. Investments create jobs and generate long-term revenue, reducing the debt over time. It's a matter of prioritizing our spending and ensuring that our economic policies work for everyone, not just those at the top. By lifting up families and investing wisely, we can build a stronger economy that benefits all Americans in the long run. Thank you.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute that.
Notice as my opponent doesn't discuss where this money is coming from. All these tax cuts, everything we're going to do. As of October of 2024, the United States national debt is at $35 trillion. This is the total amount of money the federal government has borrowed over the entire country's history. And again, this is under the administration of my opponent. So I beg the question again, where is the money coming from to afford all this? How are we going to be able to afford all these tax cuts? My tax cuts that I propose have understood this and we realized that this is an issue and that we will keep adding to the national debt, which is why we have taken a direct plan that is more carefully thought out and that will take time to implement and ease in. My opponent is taking more money and more money and more money and more money, which is going to end up piling up and putting America in debt in the future. And then, when she's done with that, she's going to blame another president for the unemployment rate and for everything else like she just blamed me, when inflation is still high under their terms. So you're going to displace the blame on me, but you're going to do all this with the government, and you're going to take all these tax cuts, and you're going to add more money to our debt, and then you're going to blame another president like it's their fault while they're in power. Thank you.
Thank you. Former President Trump, both of you have proposed tax cuts that would cost trillions of dollars in federal revenue. With the nation's debt already at a level that many economics consider unsustainable, how do you justify calling for even more tax cuts?
We need to make America more affordable and slowly but surely bring Americans back to living in a country that is affordable, can house its citizens once more very comfortably. Due to the pandemic and recent global affairs, prices of daily necessities are increasing, and we must find a quick solution that will assist our citizens. Although we have national debt, my presidency will focus on drilling other countries that owe us billions of dollars and ensuring that we receive the money we lent them in their time of need, while also keeping strong tariffs on foreign powers to ensure we make the money to apply these tax cuts. It is important that as a government and as a nation, we focus on getting the money where we can from the other nations that owe us money, which will help give us the money that we need to implement all of our tax cuts and our solutions to these problems. And my opponent discussed these tax cuts, but she does not have any intention of negotiating with other nations. She has not claimed to negotiate for other nations for our money back. Other nations owe us money. They owe us billions of dollars that can be helped to help our people and help American citizens. And she has not once stated how she will get that money back to our American citizens. And that is something that our campaign will do. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute to you.
Throughout Trump's response and answer, all he's talking about is money, right? Where's the money coming from? How are we going to get the money? How are we going to use the money? Whatever. What we have talked about and what I was trying to highlight, and I think I made my point clear, is that we are supporting families. We're supporting working families and middle-class families. And again, he didn't answer this either. Where's the money coming from to deport all these immigrants that you want to carry out in your mass deportation? But he just wants to
Do not interrupt.
Where's the, that's going to harm our that's going to harm us too. That's going to put us in debt too. But again, that's overlooked. And we need to support working families and address income inequality. That's why I focus on tax relief for low and middle income households, which can help alleviate financial burdens and promote economic mobility. That is why I highlight initiatives like expanding the earned income tax credit, providing direct payments to families and framing measures as investments in people that can stimulate the economy. By putting more money in the hands of those who need it the most, it can lead to increased consumer spending and overall economic growth. Additionally, a fair tax system can ensure that wealthy individuals and corporations contribute to their fair share to support these priorities. This approach aims to create a more equitable economic landscape while addressing the financial challenges faced by many Americans. Thank you.
Thank you. Healthcare is expensive. Vice President Harris, how does your campaign plan to deal with these? What about Medicare and Medicaid? What are your plans regarding these benefits? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Well, here are the steps I would take. 1, expanding access. I support expanding access to healthcare by building on the Affordable Care Act. We need to increase subsidies for low and middle income families, making it easier for them to afford insurance premiums and out-of-pocket costs. 2, lowering prescription drug prices. It's time to take a bold action to lower prescription drug prices. I support allowing Medicare to negotiate directly with pharmaceutical companies to ensure that Americans aren't paying the highest prices in the world for their medications. 3, strengthening Medicare and Medicaid. I believe in extending and protecting Medicare and Medicaid. This includes working close to Medicaid coverage gaps in states that have not yet expanded the program, ensuring that more people have access to critical healthcare services. 4, mental health and substance use services. We must prioritize mental health and substance use disorder treatment by integrating these services into our healthcare systems and ensuring that they are covered under Medicare and Medicaid. And 5, universal coverage. Ultimately, my vision is to work towards a system that provides universal coverage for all Americans, because healthcare is a right, not a privilege. We need to ensure that no one has to choose between their health and their financial security. Thank you.
Thank you. Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
And again, my opponent discusses universal coverage. As a nation, we cannot afford that. That will put us in trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars more in debt. Now, I understand that she said she wants to focus on that in the future. But if we start gearing towards that and gunning towards that, when we don't even focus on our situation of our economy, and we don't even focus on how we can improve now and where we can make affordability and life better now, and we focus on a big goal in the future, such as having universal health care, that will be geared towards focusing on that, and we will forget small details, such as how can we improve the economy now? How can we improve the state of our country now, rather than focusing on the goal in the future? And it is important that as a nation we realize that universal health care for all 320 million of our citizens would be an incredible thing, but it is not reachable in the near future, and we must focus on making the United States and its healthcare more affordable now for our citizens that are currently alive. And then from there we can build upon that. And for our citizens in the future, they can have a safe and secure healthcare system where they're not paying too much money and where they're able to get the care that they need effectively. And again, my opponent discusses more and more about things that will put our country into more trillions of dollars of debt. And again, where is this money coming from? And where and when are you going to implement all of these things along your campaign trail with everything else that you've talked about? Thank you.
Thank you. Former President Trump, healthcare is expensive. How does your campaign plan to deal with these? What about Medicare and Medicaid? What are your plans regarding these benefits?
Healthcare and prescription drugs costs are out of control. Republicans will increase transparency and promote choice and competition and expand access to new affordable healthcare and prescription drug options. We will protect Medicare and ensure seniors receive the care they need without being burdened by excessive costs, which is something that my opponent has claimed to want to do, but will only put our country in trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars of debt. All her plans sound great. They sound great. They're appealing to hear, and it sounds like she has a plan. But again, in the future, who is going to feel the effects of this in the future? We might benefit now. We might get the benefits of her plans now. We might see decreases in costs, and we might see better healthcare. But think about 10, 15 years in the future for our people. What is that going to look like when all the money catches up to us? What is that going to look like when our debt keeps climbing? Our debt is climbing, ladies and gentlemen, which is why I propose foreign policy as well as going for other countries and getting the billions and billions of dollars they owe us back, which my opponent has not discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute to review.
As it relates to the Affordable Care Act, understand, just look at the history to know where people stand. When Donald Trump was president, 60 times he tried to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. 60 times. You have no plan. And what the Affordable Care Act has done is eliminate the ability of insurance companies to deny people with pre-existing conditions. I don't have to tell the people here today what that was like. Remember when an insurance company could deny if a child had asthma? Remember if someone was a breast cancer survivor, if a grandparent had diabetes? And thankfully, as I've been vice president, and over the last 4 years, we've strengthened the Affordable Care Act, we've allowed for the first time Medicare to negotiate drug prices on behalf of the American people. Donald Trump said he was going to allow Medicare to renegotiate drug prices. He never did. We did. And what we have now done is cap the cost of insulin at $35 a month. Since I've been vice president, we have capped the cost of prescription medication for seniors at $2,000 a year, which is expected to save nearly 19 million seniors an average of $4,000 per year. Additionally, Medicare is now able to negotiate lower prescription prices for millions of people in America while saving taxpayers billions by paying rates 40 to 80% lower for expensive medications used to treat conditions such as blood clots, heart disease, and cancer. And when I'm president, we will do that for all people, understanding that the value I bring to this is that access to healthcare should be a right and not a privilege of those who can afford it. Thank you.
Vice President Harris, would you support any restrictions on reproductive rights? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I absolutely support reinstating the protections of Roe v. Wade. Nowhere in America is a woman carrying a pregnancy to term and then asking for an abortion. That's not happening. It's insulting to the women of America. And understand what has been happening under Donald Trump's abortion bans. Couples who pray and dream of having a family are being denied IVF treatments. Women who can barely afford childcare as it is have to travel to another state to get on a plane sitting next to strangers to go and get the health care she needs. Barely can afford to even do this. And what you are putting her through is unconscionable. The people of America the majority of Americans believe in a woman's right to make decisions about her own body. And that is why in every state where this has been an issue on the ballot, in red states and blue states, the people of America have voted for freedom. Thank you.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
Notice how those stories of women with abortions are only coming out near the election term because they started caring as soon as the election term came around. That's only when they started caring. These stories have come around and have been highlighted and have been pushed out in the media because now they have just started caring. Now they realize they can capitalize on the people that are suffering from an unfortunate circumstance that my campaign does not support. That is not the goal of the overturning of Roe v. Wade. The goal is for states to have control over issues like this. States know their voters. States understand their voters. They know what their people want. They were elected and put in charge of their states because their people voted for them and their policy and what they wanted to be done in those states. Therefore, the states should be in control of what they want to do with reproductive rights. And the states should be able to determine what their voters want and what people in their state want. It is impossible to make one national law that can govern the entirety of the United States and appease a side that has all. It is unfair to Americans that have different opposing views and different sides to this to put them under one law to focus on. And it is unfair to say that our Americans are not getting the health care that they need when the states will provide that health care if necessary. And the states must have control over this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Former President Trump, would you support any restrictions on reproductive rights? You have 2 minutes to respond.
Again, I talk about the states. It is up to the states. The states understand their voters, and the states know what their people want. So it is unfair to make a national law, one national law that everybody has to abide by, to confirm for different circumstances. What if religiously, somebody who's religious doesn't believe in that? What if somebody needs one? What if somebody doesn't need one? It is important that each state understands their voters and understands what their people want to ensure that the best response is given. We must understand that our people come first, and my campaign understands
Were you
that.
not originally pro-life and then pro-choice and then keep going back and forth?
Please
Well, that's
don't
why the
interrupt.
states should have control. The states should have control.
Can we
The
please
states will
not
have
interrupt?
control. And the states will have control so that they can make that decision. It doesn't matter what I believe because I believe for the best of the American people. My personal beliefs are not a matter of this issue because I will give it to the states and let the states decide and let the voters decide what they want to do, which shows that I am a leader who cares about their people. It does not matter my personal opinion. It does not matter what I think about the issue because I will give it to the states and I will allow their citizens and their voters to make an educated decision about what kind of health care and what they want in their states. Thank you.
Vice President Harris, you have 1 minute to refute.
Well, Donald Trump hand-selected 3 members of the Supreme Court with the intention that they would undo the protections of Roe v. Wade. And that is exactly what they did. In over 20 states, there are Trump abortion bans, which make it criminal for a doctor or a nurse to provide health care. And in one state, it provides prison for life. Trump abortion bans make no exceptions even for rape and incest, and understand what that means. Understand what that means and how he's now saying that he cares about everyone, he cares about people. But clearly they're contradicting each other. A survivor of a crime of violations to their body does not have the right to make choices or decisions about what happens to their bodies next.
My campaign
That
not
is
directly
immoral.
do this.
And one does not have to abandon their faith to agree that the government and Trump should not be telling women to do with their bodies.
States have the
I've
right to
talked
choose.
with women
Please do
around
not interrupt.
I've talked with women around our country. You want to talk about what people wanted? Pregnant women who don't want to carry a pregnancy to term suffering a miscarriage, and that are being denied care in an emergency room because healthcare providers are afraid they might go to jail, and she's bleeding out in the car in the parking lot. She didn't want that. Her husband didn't want that. A 12 or 13-year-old
highlighting
survivor
acts
of
that
Do
incest,
not interrupt.
a 12 or 13-year-old survivor of incest being forced to carry a pregnancy to term, they don't want that. I pledge to you, when Congress passes a bill to put back in place the protection of Roe v. Wade, as President of the United States, I will proudly sign it into law. Understand, if Trump were to be reelected, he would sign a national abortion ban. Understand, in Project 2025, there would be a monitor of
We
pregnancies
do not
and
support Project
miscarriages.
Do not interrupt.
She's spreading lies.
I believe the American people believe in certain freedoms, and that certain choices should not be made by the government. Trump has been inconsistent with his opinions on abortions as well, from being pro-choice and saying he believes in the choice, to then saying he's the most pro-life president ever, and taking pride in that. And I ask you, the people of America, to consider the traits that you want in a future president, because Trump doesn't care. He doesn't care about a woman's right to make choices about their own bodies, and he believes in the government's right to make those decisions for you. And that is simply not going to benefit the future of our country. This should never happen in America. It's ridiculous. It's an extreme and direct example of the discrimination against women in this country. Yet it is exactly what's happening in states across the country since the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade. And it's not stopping at the state level. Republican elected officials in Congress have proposed 4 national abortion bans while refusing to protect nationwide access to IVF and contraception. If Trump is re-elected, 2 older conservative judges on the Supreme Court, Justice Thomas at 75 and Justice Alito at 73, will step down and be replaced by much younger justices by Trump. This will mean that there will be a conservative majority in the Supreme Court until at least 2050. This majority will make it impossible to reinstate Roe v. Wade, which prevents abortion from becoming a protected right until then. This is denying women health care. This should never be a choice of any government at all.
Which is
Only
why
a
it was
choice of
given to
the
the
women
states and
themselves,
their
and
voters to
especially
decide.
not in the choice
It was
in your
given to the states
choices.
to decide and the voters.
Please stop interrupting. Thank you. All right, on to our last question, our final topic. Living in a coastal state, how energy is used and produced is crucial to the safety and way of living within the city of Stamford. Under the Biden-Harris administration, we have become energy independent and our energy consumption is lower than before. Vice President Harris, would you lift the ban on energy imports from Russia? Do you believe in using clean energy to avoid the implications of climate change? 2 minutes.
Well, there would be no trade deal signed unless it protected our environment. The reason for our import ban is simple. It's a significant action with widespread bipartisan support that will further deprive President Putin of the economic resources he uses to continue his needless war of choice. We want to reduce our
Your
collective
campaign allowed to happen.
dependence
Please
on
stop
Russian.
interrupting.
We want to reduce our collective dependence on Russian energy while taking active steps to limit impacts on global energy markets and protect our own economies. We are one of the world's largest producers with a strong domestic oil and gas industry. Natural gas
Thanks to Donald Trump.
production has never
Do
been
not
higher,
interrupt.
which is the cleanest burning fossil fuel. And as I've discussed many times before, the Inflation Reduction Act is a huge step in the right direction towards the implementation of clean energy. Under the IRA, we can do the following. Ensure the United States has the knowledge and resources necessary to develop more clean energy and manufacture more electric vehicles, encourage U.S. industries and businesses across the economy to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions, and encourage individuals to reduce their greenhouse gas emissions by improving the energy efficiency of their homes and driving cleaner vehicles. Under the IRA, we also have adaptation measures to prepare the country to face climate change effects. For example, it supports programs that would protect forests from wildfires and plant trees in urban areas, which can provide shade and lower temperatures for city dwellers. Additionally, parts of the bill specifically target funding at both disadvantaged and rural communities to ensure that climate adaptation and mitigation projects aid them directly. With around 80% of the U.S. energy consumption and production coming from fossil fuels, it's time to find a better, cleaner solution for our country. Thank you.
Former President Trump, you have 1 minute to refute.
As my opponent tries to make our nation turn into a more green environment and tries to switch everything from gas to electric, again, that costs more money. The United States, if everything was switched to electric, we would need to create so much solar power and so much power to be able to move everything and keep everything going while powering all of our cities, while powering everything else that needs to be developed in our nation. How can we switch everything to electric and disregard gas and then expect everything to run smoothly? If we put all of our cars and all of our buses and everything, if everything switches to electric, it's all going to be focusing on power grids. We'd have to build more power grids. We'd have to focus on energy, which again would cost more money, putting the country more in debt. Everything my opponent has discussed today is putting our country in debt, is setting up for future failure, which she will again blame on another person and reap off the successes of her current successes and then blame it on a future president so she doesn't
Haven't
have
you
to
said
feel
that climate
responsible.
change is a hoax?
Anyways, what I was saying was, under Donald Trump, our campaign and our presidency, we had the strongest producer of oil. We're the strongest producer of oil and natural gas in the world. So if you want that back, you need to bring it back. And if you don't want to be in trillions and trillions of dollars of debt and drive around electric vehicles that are still relatively experimental,
Did you not say that the concept of global? Did you not say that the concept of
I'm
global
speaking,
warming
Ms. Harris. I'm speaking.
was created by
I'm
the
speaking.
Chinese?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'm completed.
Former President Trump. Living in a coastal state, how energy is used and produced is crucial to the safety and way of living within the city of Stamford. Under the Biden-Harris administration, we have become energy dependent and our energy independent, and our energy consumption is lower than before. Would you lift the ban on energy imports from Russia? Do you believe in using clean energy to avoid the implications of climate change?
Again, as I stated, under my presidency, the United States became the #1 producer of oil and natural gas in the world. We will soon begin lifting the restrictions on the American energy production and terminating the Green New Deal. Republicans will unleash energy production from all sources, including nuclear, to immediately slash inflation and power American homes, cars, and factories with the resources and energy that they need. And affordable energy. Just think, if America could maintain that #1 status for oil producers in the world, we wouldn't need to depend on other countries that seem to be in the negative light right now, like Iran. Iran is the 3rd largest oil producer in the world and has been in the news lately for its terrorism. And for the United States to be allied with a country like that, it doesn't look so good to the rest of the world. So if you want America to be #1 again, if you want to produce stuff in America and you want to put America first, you will vote for Donald Trump and you will not rely on other nations. And we will have a strong nation that is powered by our military, by our economy, and by our ability to be self-sustaining so that we don't have to rely on any other nations that wish to do us harm. Thank you very much.
Vice President Kamala Harris, you have 1 minute to respond.
Well, the former president has said that climate change is a hoax.
Not
What
true.
we know is that it's very real. You ask anyone who lives in a state who has experienced these extreme weather occurrences, who is now either being denied home insurance
What has your
or
administration
being
done about
jacked
it?
up.
Can we please stop interrupting?
You ask anyone who's been the victim of what this means in terms of losing their home and having nowhere to go. We know that we can actually deal with this issue. The young people of America care deeply about this issue. And I am proud that as Vice President over the last 4 years, we have invested $1 trillion in a clean energy economy, while we have also increased domestic gas production to historic levels. We have created over 800,000 new manufacturing jobs while I have been Vice President. We have invested in clean energy to the point that we are opening up factories around
Yeah,
the
you still
world.
#1.
And Donald Trump said he was going to create manufacturing jobs. He lost manufacturing jobs.
There was a
Climate-
pandemic, I don't know if you heard of it.
Donald Trump has said, quote, the concept of global warming was created by and for the Chinese in order to make U.S. manufacturing non-competitive. And he has said that climate change is a hoax. How can we trust someone who believes climate change is a hoax, but that climate change was also created by and for the Chinese to help our country? How can we trust him to help our country, given
Because
what
I
he
made
said?
America #1 in
Especially
production.
with the way things are going, and the current state that our country's at, and the little time that we have to reverse the effects of climate change. And we must take immediate action. We can't just let him sit around saying that climate change is a hoax, or that it was created by and for the Chinese people. And with that, thank you.
That just about wraps up our debate.
Thank you for attending Westhill's 2024 mock presidential debate. We hope you found this beneficial as you embark on your political journey. Thank you, candidates, for your time and for all of you for your cooperation. Thank you.
Would everyone please remain seated? Would everyone please remain seated? Please remain seated. Thank you so much. First and foremost, thank you all of you for participating today. I want to take a few moments and speak about Angela and Aria. If my AP Gov students would please stand up. Round of applause for the help that they've done to make sure that Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. I want to make this clear. There were a lot of hard work and energy, and a lot of research has gone into this. Many students have helped to participate. They worked very hard to replicate what they've seen. I do want to say that political discourse in a friendly manner is very important, and also with words that are respectable to one another. We tried our best to present that in the best way possible based on the candidates that are presently in our presently running for office. So I hope that you go and leave here today thinking to yourself, how can I ask somebody who believes something different than me in a kind way why they believe what they do? Don't judge, listen. You may find an awful lot of common ground that you did not know existed. So it's very important. Additionally, Mr. Tamalini's class has put together a nice little survey for us that we are going to share with the teachers here, that we are going to request that you take a few moments and complete. I will send the links out to all the teachers. It's a 2-question little form, and that our AP Government students will analyze as well. Our mock election is on November 4, Monday, November 4. We will be out in force, the entire class, with our computers. We will be posting all of our results in the Westward, which is our media outlet here at Stanford, at Westhill High School, which you will then be able to compare to the national results. Finally, does anybody have last-minute questions before I allow you all to go to lunch? Not a hand. Yes. This will not affect, well, I don't know. I'm not going to answer that question. It doesn't affect here, but what it does affect is your knowledge base, your ability to go and learn and be an educated voter in the future, which could eventually change who we are as a country. And that is our goal here today. So yes. Major Weber.
I would have to disagree with this girl. They go home and talk to their parents. In mature, educated positions, they might change their parents' vote. You don't know.
Possibly, possibly. I don't know that Connecticut is moving, but possibly. Major Weber, I agree with you. They do influence their parents greatly, certainly at the local level, and the local level is where most of the change happens that we would need. So remember, vote local. It's the most important. Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much.